the agenda.
Didn't, but I can make one for you.
I run, yeah, run and grab one. I can pull one up here as well.
Want me to run and grab it?
Yeah, I don't have it on my.
Okay.
my
It's only just to
computer.
talk about the meetings
Okay,
with
good
the
one.
agencies, no,
Good
is,
one, okay.
yeah.
First of all, I'd like to establish the fact that we have a quorum. And I'm gonna ask everybody to say their name. John,
John Balash,
Bert Johnson,
Veronica Volchik, Dorothy Hertz. That establishes the quorum. You don't have to do the staff right now. to do
Okay.
that.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
second,
Bert,
Aye, Bert, aye.
John,
John Balash, aye.
Veronica, I, Dorothy, I. As a preliminary matter of, I, the chair of the CRC, permit me to confirm that all members in person anticipating the agenda are present can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. John,
I, John Balash,
Bert,
Bert Johnson, aye.
Veronica.
Veronica Volchik, I.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Sherrill,
Aye.
Ann?
Aye.
Anticipated speakers on agenda, please confirm, please respond in the affirmative. I am gonna let,
Karen,
I'm gonna put Tara on as a public member so that she can speak later.
Mhm.
Tara,
Tara Rasteri, yes.
good morning, or no, it's actually, good afternoon. This is open meeting of the Contract Review Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, and current order of July 2022. Due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order to suspend the requirement of open meeting law to have all meetings in publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. We are actually now in a hybrid. The order which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure in public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. The CRC is conveying by video conference, is this a Zoom app or
Yeah.
Zoom app posted on the town's website identifying how the public may join? Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Also, make sure that you turn off your speakers when you are not in the meeting. All supporting materials that have been provided by members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, question, or motions. Please hold until your name is called further. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. After members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. And it is important to remember everybody, too, is that we have to limit our cell phone usage because any use of a cell phone during a meeting becomes public document. Okay. So we're gonna go into our discussions.
Agenda.
Thanks.
Yes, just pulling that up.
Then we established this, so it's a approval of the agenda, which he approved.
Yep, so we're good. I
And so
think
we're,
it's Just a discussion of those 4 organizations.
Oh, that's.
no,
Monday.
that's Monday's thing you just pulled up.
12.
That's
We're just,
Monday.
we're just talking today.
Wait, that's 12, that was
Sorry.
Monday.
Yeah.
Right.
That's. Thank you for being one step ahead of us, but we don't need to be that far ahead,
Yeah, no, that's 2-way.
if you don't mind.
Dorothy,
Yes,
I know that you had mentioned to try to keep today's meeting as short as possible, but on Monday we have the Interfaith Council and NAMI.
Mhm.
And those are 2 that we haven't discussed, so if we could do those.
We are going to, thank
Good,
you,
thank you. Right.
just. I was. Yeah, I thought maybe we'd start with NAMI. Love mine. I've actually also asked, have we heard any word, as I'm going through these? I wrote to Brian, have we heard any word on where we're standing on cannabis?
No. I have gotten the prototype of the reporting form together. And
Mhm.
I'm doing the demo run with it, doing any impact costs associated with the health department first, because that's where I work. And then I plan on presenting it to town admin and then distributing it out to start collecting information. We still have to wait on liability. So like the big problem is that the new legal framework allows us to decide if we want to have grant funding as part of the impact cost. But there's no legal framework for putting that in place, and there's no way to disentangle that with, as best I understand it, the way that we collect that money now, which is a sales tax, and then this impact cost is not necessarily a sales tax. So somebody well above my pay grade needs to decide how we want to approach it. I'm just trying to figure out the mechanics of reporting, and then I think they'll have to decide whether or not the cannabis funding will go forward.
Yeah, I wrote to see where we stand.
I know it's been like, there's no good guidance on that right now. The law is literally being developed as people challenge the lawsuit. So this could be one that's difficult for us to figure out until the very last minute what we're gonna do with it.
I knew it was up in the air, I just, it makes a big difference on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, a huge
For us.
difference.
What about this?
Well. I did read over NAMI. And. I do have a bunch of questions on this. The hospital, the situation at the hospital, because at one point here, when they're talking about their funding, how they, the clients. Pay on a sliding scale or whatever they can afford. And they refer to the hospital to see if they are eligible for Mass Health.
He's doing something about the beeping that's very loud. Do you hear the beep?
Yeah, I do.
That's
Okay.
where he's gone. So
Okay.
everybody knows Jericho stepped out to
Okay,
see it was the door was left open.
okay, thank you.
So that's their healthcare advocate. So what they're saying is that they have people go seek out the healthcare advocates
Okay,
if they don't have insurance.
okay. But with the Department of Social Services at the hospital that last month, or whatever, we found out that there is not a department at this point in time.
So
Does that affect this?
update on that.
Let me just answer that. They still have the healthcare advocate there. There's
Okay.
just one healthcare advocate. There used to be like 4 of them.
It was
They're present.
3 licensed social workers and then 1 specialist for the healthcare advocate, right?
No, there were 4 healthcare advocates that put together that worked with clients, and then it went down to like 3, then 2, they're at 1. So there is one person that you can go in and see, and you,
Okay.
and it's free. That's
Mhm.
free. That's
Right.
mandated by the state.
Right,
And that person has not left
okay,
that position at all.
And they
Okay.
did, Chris Slovaki announced that they had selected a person for, to a new head of the social services department there. That I have yet to meet. Ironically, this person's name is also Sarah, which was the last person's first name as well. Time I spoke to NCH about that, I told them, obviously, once they get onboarded, there's a lot of stuff going on, but I'd like to meet them as soon as possible, because basically, I worked very closely with social services at the hospital, and
mhm,
that's a big gap in our
Right.
referral systems and a bunch of information about, especially specifically around certain insurance related subjects, so.
okay. So what I understand, NAMI, the grant is to cover their contract. Get how they refer to them,
Independent therapy.
independent therapist.
Independent
And
therapist.
they're only allowed to make $2,000 a month, the independent therapist. So this, what they're asking for is basically to cover whatever extra expenses that would go with them. When I got to the packet, I'm looking at the budget. And I don't know if this is an error on their part, but the budget says 2020. And it's giving me 2019 and 2020 budget, but it has no bearing on this application. So we need, if that was an error on their part with just they didn't update their spreadsheet, or I got stymied at that point. So we need to have that clarified.
Well, they're processing the annual 2023 budget is
Right.
what they said.
Right. But the numbers they gave us go back to 2020. So,
Which is common, which we will ask for. It's common not with them, but with people to give us one when it's not to their.
okay,
And when it hasn't been finalized.
okay.
So we will find that to be common in some of these, and then
Okay,
they give us one as it gets finalized.
okay, so when they come on Monday, that'll have to be clarified if we're getting updated numbers. Because things just, it's very confusing because things are not lining up with
Their
what
request.
their request. So I assume that we just don't have the right information. And then I went back to see that last year, I guess their request was for 101. No, they asked for 150 last year and we gave them 101 and they're asking for 150 again. And that's what we funded last year. But beyond that, I was a little bit confused because not having the right numbers that were meeting up here.
The budget.
Yeah.
Having the budget.
Yeah,
We can definitely ask for clarification on it on Monday when they
Right.
come in.
right.
What time is the meeting on Monday?
1:00.
1:00. So we can try and send it, and let's make a note for both of us to try and give them a heads up that question's coming. If they've clarified their 2021 budget, is that the ask?
Yes,
2021,
Yeah,
and NAMI is Jackie Lane.
Jackie
Yeah.
Lane.
right.
were there
It
any,
should be 2022 budget.
Right.
2022 budget.
so do we want 2020?
They're
Well,
trying to get us 2020. They said they were presently working on 2023 if you read that. Read it. So
Yeah. Okay.
it would be better for us to reference the 2022 budget
right.
as it is now.
Okay.
Okay, so what I see is a consistency here where we have the independent therapist. Do you understand what they they did, within the concept of why they did it. Okay. Wasn't sure if you understood, since we went into it, was a new program for everybody a year ago.
And it was somewhat, I know there was the reimbursement question came up as a part of that. But like, I think it's the independent therapists that are not able to, like, this allows them to provide services to people who don't have insurance coverage.
Right.
That really covers a large chunk of what is left behind, so.
Exactly.
And they see, I think it gives them an option outside of the Fairwinds.
Right.
Right, they get independent. It's also, I think some of the people also just,
Joanna is logging in, just as a heads up.
just as some of the other clients, they have some patients that do have the ability for health insurance, but it's on the slidings,
Right.
their ability is minimal. And what I'm interested is I want to know more about the new mental health laws.
Oh,
Right,
Legislation that has
they
gone
kept
in.
referring
They kept
to,
referring to it, which I would
So-
like to know a little bit more about what the changes are as far as the
So-
state.
I know about this through the behavioral health initiative. That's where this was announced. The state pushed through a pretty broad revision in the mental health. Hey, Joanna.
We're gonna say it's
418.
418 and Joanna's joining us. Hi, Joanna.
Joanna, you're muted.
I said, sorry, I was in the waiting room for a while.
And that was, we got our wheels started rolling on that one. I didn't notice the pending there.
It's okay.
Apologies.
It's okay.
So we're briefly discussing NAMI. The question on the table is revisions to the state's behavioral health financing and legislation. The big takeaway is that the state is mandating communities have something called a CBHC. It's a community-based healthcare clinic.
Right.
These are CBBHC. So this is a equivalency specifically for behavioral health. They assign the contracts in a way similar to how the Family Resource Center is assigned. There are different agencies that may hold that license. It mandates a full range of specific services in all communities everywhere on Nantucket and increases certain available funding streams to allow that service. CBHC will be, essentially it means that there's there's built-in case management, there's increased referrals, and the CBHC and the crisis contracts are tightly connected so that there's a pipeline from crisis to treatment. There's a enormous breakdown of all of this stuff. I'll try and get it from.
So I read a little bit about this in the spring. Okay, and where do we stand as a community on it?
So the CBHC contract was awarded to Fairwinds in, I want to say, September-ish. They and Gosnold applied for it. Fairwinds was selected as well as for the crisis contract. I don't know if those two were a package deal or not. And what that means is that there are now state mandates to improve certain services. I do not know it's a 250-page law and abstract, and the section we covered was in terms of what it mandated, what necessary steps were mandated before the end of this year. So I don't know the full breakdown. I know that it foregrounds the healthcare equivalency between behavioral health and physical health stuff. It's the mechanism by which they added the behavioral health transport ongoing to the budget from now on, I think was through this. And then past that, there's a lot of granular breakdowns, like they have to have a certain number of crisis beds per 100,000 per population based. There needs to be the on-call, and then it's packaged in together with a physical location that it has to be at that acts as like a hub for all of the other services. So it's similar to the FRC or IFC model, where there's a agency that is a collaborative hub, and then it makes connections and referrals inward and outward. I will dig up the like, I know Jason has a slide deck that he's planning on presenting somewhat soonish. I can see if I can get the cliff notes or the raw documents for that for you, if you'd like.
Okay, and could you tell me, but there's also changes to the insurance
Yes,
programs
so
for people, and that's the big part.
so the-
And do you know how much money they got with this grant?
specifically, so the contract, I do not know how much money they received as part of this contract.
Mhm,
I don't know if it falls under a regular grant or exactly how that works.
mhm.
But I know that it changes the way that they can apply for reimbursement, and it extends behavioral health related coverage that's provided by Mass Health,
Mhm.
thus kind of extending the baseline that all other plans have to get. So I think part of this involves adding certain reimbursement streams that were not accessible last year, but I am not versed enough to tell exactly how that breakdown works down. I don't know, so it was a policy put in place by the Baker administration. It's already funded, the mandate is in, but there's questions on how various implementation will be handled at state that I do not know.
And do you have anybody that
Would
you
know
know
that?
that has a better understanding of it? They could. explain?
Jason, couple of the consultants from the Behavioral Health Initiative. And then
Do you know anybody there besides Jason?
at Fairwinds that would know this, or at the Behavioral Health Initiative? The two consultants, so Jackie Lane and Joan Quinlan are, not Jackie Lane, Nancy Lane, she also has a name for the last name. They're more versed in it, originally were in state beforehand. I can connect you with them if you want to get like.
Yeah, I would like to better understand.
But it's all of the effects besides the CBHC contract and certain, I think, regulatory changes will be phased in over the next year. So I don't know that it'll completely impact this year. I know that they'll take crisis over on the first of this year. I'm sorry, first of 23. And then CBHC is phased in on a rolling basis as the different sort of legal modules are brought online. I know it's
They'll
a
slowly.
yeah.
introduce.
I don't want to speculate too much on exactly what that's going to impact here because I don't know. I'm not.
I'll reach out and talk to Jason.
And then I'll also try and connect you with like a Cliff Notes CBHC from the consultants.
Why don't you give her the consultant phone number or?
I'll pass the emails along,
Yeah,
yeah.
so she can talk. to
Yeah,
her.
because it'd be good to better understand.
Yeah, I'll just do like a CC with an introduction and then off you go.
Okay. Yeah, because I'd like to know how much that's gonna actually impact.
It's a lot. I mean, I think it's like, it's a 50% increase in like the money allotted for this part of the system at least. It's a significant increase in money, and the biggest parts that Jason was specifically excited about when they were reviewing it was the way that it changes the regulatory and reporting environment, which makes it way easier for them to make partnerships. And it builds in support, like they're already in the state, state mental health, like that means that they're like connected to a state or agency off island for additional resources, as I remember it. But yeah, that's about it.
Okay. Joanna, do you have any questions or?
I mean, that feels very complicated.
It's very complicated.
Very complicated.
Won't largely change anything for NAMI this year, I don't believe.
I think it will if the insurance factor comes in, and I've heard a lot about the insurance factor, not only from them, but from other resources working with, especially the youth,
I don't
on
know.
how that kids that are on Mass Health, it will actually help them get better treatment. And so it'll be interesting to see where that stands. So I would love to talk to them about it.
Oh, Julian Sear wrote it. So
Right.
that's another one. He
And she's worked, Jackie Lane works with him a lot. They have a pretty good collaboration going on.
Yeah.
Okay,
Anything else on the NAMI topic that anyone wants to bring up?
that's what I was just asking to find
Now, Jason, you gotta let the chairman run the meeting.
Gotcha.
out. Seriously, no. Tara, do you have any public comment on that? I'll allow you to.
No, I don't have any public comment. I'm interested in the answers to the questions when we meet with them.
When we meet with them. I'm gonna clarify that.
When you meet with
Sorry. Thank you. Sorry. Okay. Fuel assistance. Joanna and Linda.
Well, Joanna, really.
Okay.
You're up, Joanna.
You're up, Joanna.
Fuel assistance? Yeah, I'm not ready. I'm also at home and I left all my papers at the office, so I'm a little bit like discombobulated.
Okay.
It's one of those days I spent, yeah, well, never mind.
Yeah, we know what kind of day it is.
Yes.
Well,
Well-
I could talk a little bit about it. Yeah,
Cause you,
yeah.
you put time in there.
Yeah. And, I'll speak specifically for the food portion of this where, and I think the application does show how the need, over this past year continues to increase. And, from firsthand experience, I can tell you that weekly, it's astounding how much food, goes out and how many new clients we get there. The need is growing and it's not going to stop, unfortunately. Part of what they're asking for with the 95,000, which is, when I look from last year, where are we? They got 80,000 last year and they're asking for 95 this year. They've hired some new individuals and part of it is their succession plan. The executive director at some point in time does plan on retiring and they've brought on an assistant that will be groomed to take over that role. So
Can you tell us who that is?
Tom, right?
Tom
Tom.
Dixon.
Tom Dixon?
Tom Dixon. Yeah. So part of what they're asking for, and then they've also recently hired two individuals that replaced people that have left over the past year. But they're looking to actually bring in more people. One of the things that goes on through here, and there's a couple other factors that are coming in, the facility needs to be changed.
I
The
thought they
building-
looked at one, no?
Well,
Right
and
here,
that,
right?
and that didn't happen.
thought so.
That's not happening. I know that. But the building where they are has been sold to the town now. I believe that they can stay for the time being, but the problem is that the facility just is completely inadequate. There's not enough storage, there's not enough space for interviewing clients, just to conduct this business in a sensitive manner. Clients are spilled out onto the street, inclement weather, et cetera, and also not having enough storage for adequately bringing in food. So what happens now is 1 week food comes from off island, and to supplement, they're buying food from Stop and Shop on the alternate week, because there's only one shipment coming in. Well, it's twice a month that a shipment comes in from Boston.
Well, they go to the Cape.
Right, and they go, that's for some, and some, comes in from the Boston facility too. So, the perishables and the non-perishables. So basically,
Okay, I'm gonna go back and
Yeah.
just ask a question. They're no longer just getting it, because the Boston Food Pantry used to do it to the Cape.
right,
And
right,
then you picked it up on the Cape.
right, exactly.
And they're doing that.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and why are they not going once a week and they're only going twice a week now? Do we know? I mean, twice a month.
The way that it's been set up that I'm aware, twice a month, the van goes over and picks up. And that's also been an issue with getting, ferry reservations. That was an issue this
Well,
year.
the message came out from the Steamship Authority now.
Reminding
This
everyone.
is the time for them
Right.
to get their act together and not end up like UPS did last year.
Exactly. And there also is other money that is coming into this that was completely separate from the town, which is the money that came through with COVID monies.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we all know that that's the true, yes.
Right. So part of that is the intention is to buy a bigger van that could bring over more food. So when it goes, there could be everything sort of falls into place from there. But they need a new facility. They need it just is the need keeps growing. And the idea they also talked about in here is to hire additional people. Volunteers basically do the physical filling of orders and stocking, etc. But volunteers can't work with sensitive information from clients, so hiring another client service person also.
Okay, so that's been a pet peeve of mine because volunteers can do it. Volunteers did do it for a very long time.
Mhm.
And you can vet your volunteers so that because you don't have to spend money having volunteers do some of this work.
Right.
That I know, and I know firsthand can be done by a volunteer and the volunteers. The people don't volunteer to do these things to
Right.
go out and gossip.
Right,
They
exactly.
volunteer because
And
they
we,
need
and
something.
also volunteers do sign non-disclosure agreements, and there is training that people understand the sensitivity of what is being dealt with.
Right, so this has always been a pet peeve of mine is that there's so much more they could do
Mhm,
using volunteers in a couple of their programs
mhm,
where they could make a bigger impact
mhm.
and and maybe even impact the people that are doing the volunteering, whether it's somebody that they've already helped, who knows the significance of it being personal.
Yeah.
Because their numbers, the numbers that they help on some of the things, I'm actually appalled they're not higher.
Mhm.
Because they do limit what they do.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah,
been a pet peeve of mine, and I was promised that more volunteers 2 years ago, that more volunteers would come in to do these kind of programs and work on them, and I have not seen it happen yet.
well, I can say that some volunteers do help a little bit more. And happen to be one of those. So I've been trained a little bit more to do things, but it's very limited on what volunteers are.
Allowed to do.
Thank you.
Right, but
Yeah,
it should, it
should
actually shouldn't be, because
Right.
in reality is that, when. Basically, they come to us for salary only. They're one of the only organizations that comes completely, for not program, but salary.
Right,
Because. And that's where we have this problem of, do you fund a program or do you fund, and the reality is with some. Without funding a salary, you're not funding a program.
right.
Okay, so there's been a catch too, and there's been a lot of, over the last year, last year. There was a lot of stuff that came up, about the food pantry.
Mhm.
And it became, there were a lot of discussions, but I had a lot with then Reverend Max.
Mhm.
Great discussions. I actually had to stop people from calling me,
Mhm.
that ended up starting their own private nonprofit because, I was like, you have to stop calling because as where I sit, I have to be able to be, very open-minded
Right.
as I go into things, and so I don't want any more, and so I knew a lot of what was going on.
Right.
And I advocated on our behalf, on the CRC's behalf, and asking where was the Interfaith Council on this? And I sort of got back from the Interfaith Council that there was a lot that, they didn't realize the limitation on the volunteers and the limitation on some of the ways people were treated.
Mm.
Interestingly is, can you tell me that whether you feel that, is there still that feeling within the demographics, of the population that they're, feeling a little like they,
I could fill in the blanks on that. I think that there's a couple of factors that come into play. I've seen a overall effort, concerted effort to be more sensitive to the clients.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, the facility just does not allow for the privacy. Also, sometimes language differences. We did have some volunteers who were translating,
Mhm.
that would come in. That was very, very helpful because it's humiliating and demeaning for people to have to share private information in a public
Always.
area. And, we go very hard not to, share people's names and information or whatever, but when you've got 50 people waiting in a small area and it's, so-and-so, where's so-and-so, and, how much, tell me again, how much do you make a week? It's difficult, but I have seen some steps in trying to do that better, but there's a long way to go there. And I don't want to say it's just a new facility, but it also is, I think that training of volunteers and training of staff in how to appropriately deal with information, and we shouldn't have to train someone in treating someone with dignity, but sometimes that's necessary.
Which is very sad.
It's sad.
Yeah, very sad. Have they done anything to go on to their computer services that they had talked about doing their programming? Because there was a lot last year. I knew that they were offered a program that which they didn't
Right,
take on, and
the partnership with
NRP,
NRP and
process first.
Process First, right? I get so confused with all of the different names, the acronyms or whatever. And yes, from what I understand, it's migrating onto using, a different system. It's migrating at this point.
so they're still in the process of
Right.
of making that move. And do you, when you see, I'm just asking you this because, and the reason I'm asking everybody is asking these
Yeah.
questions is because she volunteered. So we have a sort of a firsthand on it.
Yeah.
Do you feel that the numbers are truly reflected in this?
I tried, and also I think that there was some difficulty in
The formatting.
the formatting or whatever, because I just said the numbers are inaccurate, but I do. If anything, these numbers are underrepresented. what
of
is
the
here.
family, because now, it was interesting, because last year I was told that they felt that they had like said numbers that weren't really accurate to the actual, like, they
That-
weren't
that
as
was
high
like they
as we
were-
were told.
They were exaggerated. the
They were
numbers were.
exaggerated, so
yeah.
I'm just wondering, what, the consistency of our numbers and what we're seeing as far as.
Right. Right.
And do you know if they have a plan in place for their move? Since this was, I know they have a lot invested
A
in
lot
trying to
invested
do
in
this.
that.
And do we know why that fell through?
Just from what I was told
Mhm.
is, there was difficulty, the landlord changed their mind. You know, it was gonna be half the food pantry, and landlord wanted to rent the other part to a,
Private kitchen?
like, no, or retail. It was gonna be retail, a retail business there, which didn't make sense at all. But from what I understand, it's dead in the water.
It's too bad, it's an ideal
Yeah.
spot.
It's an
Well,
ideal spot.
Except for the fact that it's still very public.
There needs to be something, yeah, I mean, it would be
It's still very
marginally better, but there might even be more.
I think it's
More
more
traffic,
exposure there
actually,
than there are
yeah.
in town, to be honest with you, because that, not as many people go down that road in town as they go to the Stop and Shop
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
like, in all honesty.
I know,
But, it's interesting, particularly during, tourist season. We're right on the street. And, we get wonderful donations from some of our local businesses. And, if they've got overstock of strawberries or berries, and, the clients can pick their own from those out there. And we have tourists stopping saying, how much are your strawberries? And, I'm there and I'm saying, this is our food pantry. And people are like, food pantry? What do you mean? You need a food pantry here? That, one thing I've asked for is we need to have readily available to hand out a donation envelope when people stop and say that,
Yeah, yeah, I would agree.
because it's, I think it's a lost opportunity. But, the facility is grossly lacking at this point.
One of the things that I had heard of as being one of the benefits of the partnership between NRP Process
Mhm.
First and the food pantry was a potential to collaborate with NRP's existing partners, Pip and Anchor, et cetera, et
Right.
cetera.
Well, what's happening right now, which is a positive, and I believe it's coming through, of course, St. Paul's. There are prepared meals that are available,
Right.
and that's through this partnership that took place.
That's the
So-
Wednesday meals, right? The
Well,
Wednesday dinners?
well, what happens is on Tuesday, we get one or two different offerings that the clients just have to take it home and heat it up. So it's prepared food and, we, that's been just over the last, say, 3 months, and that's an outgrowth of the partnership. So that's a positive thing,
Mhm.
positive. So.
Jericho.
Is it coming through there too? That's probably what it
No,
is.
no. but
Joanna, do you have any questions
Need to.
or
try to
comments?
Office down there to get someone out here.
You're muted, Joanna.
Okay. Joanna's mute. We're gonna unmute Joanna.
No, she's got on.
Okay.
I got it. So what I was saying is their books, I just found the thing and looked at it. Their books are very messy,
Yeah, extremely.
right?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not, they're not well kept. So it's very confusing. I guess that would be one. And then the second thing is that this process, I mean, obviously I drive by there, I know where it is. And while I'm sensitive, I mean, okay, so I guess I'm gonna back up. Linda told me that the lease had fallen through some time ago, and that it's very similar to the story that was just reported, that the landlord changed her mind. So that is out of the question. And I did know that Tom Dixon was working there but I would be curious to talk to him and see what improvements he is recommending, because, you know, he's a pretty smart guy, and I can't imagine that he would have. I think that he would immediately recognize if anybody's privacy was compromised, or, you know, that sort of awkwardness was happening. And it seems to me like a better intake process is required. Right? Even if it's just that you give people some paper to fill out and they go and come back, rather than have a conversation while somebody's in line. That just seems, you know, inappropriate altogether.
Mhm.
Right? And I agree with the suggestion about being able to hand out donations, but I also think that there's a much larger opportunity for partnership with many of the local restaurants, farms, et cetera, that we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of.
Right, and you know, organizations like, I can't remember offhand, but where you've got restaurants that have perishable goods
Yes.
that,
Well, a number of years ago, we went around this time of year to the restaurants and they were all getting ready to close down.
that still
And
happens.
they were very happy to take
Yeah.
the charitable deduction on the tax return for
Yeah.
all the food they gave the.
Yeah, that happens, and that's a wonderful thing, but on the other hand, you know, we wind up with tubs of sour cream,
Yeah.
or you know, frozen things that is way too much for a family to consume, and not have the facility to break it down, which, you know, is, you know, you're dealing with food. So it's great, and we do get lots of good donations, but then it's, you know, wind up with a side of beef, and it's like, well, let's find a family that could use the side of beef, you know. But even on a daily basis, when even if it's Stop and Shop has their prepared foods and it can't be sold the next day by law, but it's still good. But you know, there again, it's the matter of having a facility to process that. So that has to be part of the bigger picture also, which, you know, from what I understand, it's supposed to be coming together to do that. But when,
It's been a long process.
yeah,
It's been a very long process.
Yeah.
Come a long way from the basement of the Episcopal Church
Right,
parish shop.
right?
yeah.
What?
I
The
remember
permanent?
the old days when the food pantry was in the basement of the.
St.
Episcopal Church
Paul's.
parish shop.
I mean, I also think that there's like there's a, I don't know, I don't want to really use the word weird, but it is weird, like a weird socioeconomic discriminatory, I don't know. I mean, I don't, every community has people that are in need, right? Every community does. It's part of how communities and societies work. And I think that to label people or stigma people, or even for us to perpetuate that, it would be somehow embarrassing. I don't want to do that. I don't think that people should be embarrassed at having to come here. It's a circumstance, right? It's not something to be ashamed of. And I think that even in how we talk about it, we should be careful that we're not, you know, perpetuating that any of these people should feel any, you know, less than or shame because of whatever life circumstance that they're in. And so, I mean, I don't know if there's a way to make this, you know, more of a store experience so that
Yeah.
it's less of a handout experience, right?
Exactly.
So that it looks and feels different.
Well, I don't know if any of you saw on television, the NFL encourages all their players to get involved. And one of the players, I can't remember, if it was Kentucky or Tennessee, he went back to his home area.
Yeah.
And opened a store. It was like a supermarket, and you just came in and you shopped for yourself.
Exactly.
And there's no checkout, you just boxed your goods up and left with what you wanted.
Exactly. You know, we've talked about that, of having, you know, because right now a client comes and they check off what they want, and we look at the number of people in the household, and that determines how much we will give, but the volunteers are actually filling the order, and then it's turned over to the client. But having a facility where, you know, check in, and then the client can go through and pick off the shelves, to make it more of a shopping experience. Nantucket is not, it is different than other places, there's no doubt about that. But when, the clients that I have seen over the course of the last 2 years that I've spent a lot of time there, it's an eye opener because, there are people who, most of the clients are working. These are working people, but when you have rent or you have other expenses, this is a service that we can provide. We can give food because you can't necessarily tell the landlord, I'm sorry, I had to buy clothes for my kids, or I needed, money for, something else.
Or my fuel costs.
For my fuel, or, I needed a tire for my car this week, but, food is available.
Right. I mean,
So
I don't,
it's-
you can speak to this better than I can in terms of, the way that they distribute it, but it seems like they need to do like an operational audit
Mm.
and really have somebody look at their processes and figure out a better way to do this, because this is the second year that, we're hearing kind of firsthand that it's a mess. And that it's not, that it's impacting people's dignity is really disturbing to me. And I don't think anybody should be made to feel ashamed that they need this kind of support when, this Nantucket's a tough place to live. Right. And I mean, we have teachers who I'm sure are in a situation where they may need these services. And that's not by the fault of theirs. Right. Or anyone who's having a job and then needing extra support to be able to afford the tire or any other life emergency that might happen.
I think it's also important to remember that we're a couple of months out from, we're maybe 3 to 4 months out from a national recession, and that there are economic forces at work right now that are driving up costs across the board. And that, over the next 6 months, we can expect a wide variety of staples, including energy costs, to increase on the double-digit percentages, which for people who are on the edge is going to require a lot more services.
Exactly.
I do know that, I'm sorry, Ron, I was just going to speak to the process audit notion. I think a lot of the NRP, the Nantucket Resource Partnership, and then a lot of this Process First thing has kind of done that.
Mhm.
And I think that they seem to be making a lot of the questions and issues that have come up through this are things that I've heard them address. I think they partner, like both in-house at Food Pantry, it seems like that they're addressing this and they're trying to improve their process significantly. And then that there's a greater food security program in place that does seem to be getting partnerships with local farms, local restaurants, and having a more nimble sort of technological system so that they can communicate these needs quicker and more efficiently.
Right.
Um,
Two points. I don't want to negate the volume of what happens in that facility, because it is, there's a lot of effort that goes in on many people's parts, and but that doesn't say that a process review doesn't need to take place. Some of the programs that have been tossed about is the food pantry becomes the food stable supplier, where the clients are given a like a SNAP card or like WIC, and they can then buy in Stop and Shop their perishable items. So that's another possibility. So there's a number of things happening, and I just don't know how, I'm not privy to the fact of, when all of this is going to take place. And, I assume that Janice and maybe Tom will be coming on Monday. I don't know who.
I believe Janice is presenting, and I think she said she was going to bring Tom along as well.
Okay.
No.
Okay. that they can answer, very specifically on these issues. But, in reading through what's been prepared, it's basically looking to staff up as the need continues to increase. And as you said,
How
they're
long
not
are they
asking,
gonna have the twice, the cover over between Tom and Janice? How long is that? Like that supposed to, the transition, do you know?
I don't know.
I
don't
talked
know.
to Tom, I think he said this would have been end of summer-ish.
Yeah, he started around August, I
I
believe.
think I can't remember, Janice may have announced an official retirement date, but I think she was saying she was gonna be phasing herself out over the course of this year. I gotta double check on that, but I think she said, like, she was expecting to not be presenting at next year's CRC when I talked to her last.
Right, right.
So I guess the question is, are they paying for two?
At the moment,
Directors at
it
the
looks like they're getting grant money, specifically for
Yes.
professional development through Remain.
Right.
Yeah.
To 35K, so I'm assuming that's his, at least part of, or a substantial portion of his salary in this interim period.
I thought some of that was towards their work with this organization. No,
The exec, the way that they break down that professional development cost
Yeah,
is, I think they said specifically, where'd I go? Oh, yeah, so it's a grant from Remain for 35,000 professional development for new assistant ED, so they may
Right.
have additionally had. Yeah, so it does not
Yeah.
look like his,
I mean, here's, I think the other thing that I would just throw out there is that, I mean, I don't know their lease situation on their current space, but let's face it, they're not gonna get another space. I mean, in all reality, they can't pay a commercial rent. Somebody would have to donate it, and there's a lack of available space. So where would they possibly find a space to move to? So it seems that instead of wasting time thinking about that, they should be spending some of that time thinking about how to better utilize the space they have. Right? I mean,
have you been in that space, Joanna?
I have.
It's so small.
yeah.
I know. I mean, unless,
So-
wait a sec, Bert, I have a question for you. What about letting them use the VFW?
Well,
Where would you
we
store
have
this
to,
stuff?
we have to rent our space to DFW because we have a mortgage to pay out there. And
Right.
we have such a big building, high utilities, so.
And it would have to be a segregated space in the VFW because you can't bring in all of the supplies and break down at the end of the day,
I mean,
and
what
you've got,
this group should do is the town has that land out there where the new fuel farm is and all the rest of it on that road past Miles. Is take a little couple of acres of land or an acre of land and come up with a development program and build their own facility out there with what they actually need.
it has to be on a transportation, a lot of clients take MARTA.
Bus. Yeah.
So that's why that location is ideal. Actually, I'm looking forward that now that winter is coming because we've been allowed to spill over into the bus station. And that helps the situation because then you can have a little bit more privacy as opposed to, everyone standing,
The
shoulder to shoulder.
transportation issue
Yeah.
is easily solved. The NADA bus comes right out Milestone Road, everything goes, stops right at the end of New South Road. It could easily loop down there on whatever Thursdays, whatever day they do their food and make the loop on that day,
Mhm.
extend it a little bit.
Well,
down
it
that
could be,
road.
yeah, I mean, there's
it's
always
not- it's
adjustments
a-
that
it's
can
an
be
easily
made.
solvable problem. I mean, it's
Well,
not the end of the.
Yeah.
But
I was just checking real quick. I also know that part of the food security plan that CFN is putting together. Where the food pantry has drawn funds from was building out commercial kitchen partnerships
Right.
and storage space at a couple of, like at Pip and Anchor, which used to be Annie's
Right.
on Amelia. And that there were one of the real reasons they wanted that spot is it had a potentially licensable commercial kitchen, so they could
right,
do a larger they can make much better use of both space and resources if they can do that.
It also
So-
had refrigeration and
Yeah.
a walk-in and a freezer. It had a lot
Right.
of availability.
I mean,
I mean,
it's-
that's a perfect spot.
It would have been a perfect spot for them for a lot of reasons. So I think there are ways that there are things happening in parallel with the change of leadership at the food pantry that I think are addressing a lot of the issues here. And I do think that there has been, at least from what I know of, a marked change from my first year in this position into the second year. So that, that was just, these are all things that have been coming from, inside the house, as it were. These are all definitely ideas that they've been working on.
right,
Bert's leaving.
okay,
Take care, Bert.
Bye, Bert.
okay.
Bye, Bert. See you
Okay.
Monday.
No, we won't.
Oh, that's right. He's on his way to Florida.
Now,
Oh,
if you need me. for a
Safe
vote,
driving,
I'll-
Bert.
Oh,
Okay.
I've done that with other.
It won't, but it won't be a vote because that'll be everybody coming in to talk. Yeah, do me a favor and let me know you make it safely.
Yes, mother.
yeah,
Yeah, so this will be, I mean,
it's, I
It's
don't wanna say,
challenging.
I don't wanna say it's a work in progress, but I think that there's a lot more than what we're seeing just on the paper here. Process review, facility, and change will come.
yeah, I'd like to sort of see a better breakdown as to what where the money. Our applied money would go.
Because what I
I see, I mean, I
gather
know
from
it's
here,
for
it's
salary.
basically for salaries, that's what.
It's
the
always been for salaries. Yes.
Right,
Right, and it's, what happens is if you read the budgets. It's very hard for, what they don't do is actually tell us, which everybody else does, that asks for. This over 25,000 is actually what the salary is of each person.
we have most of them in here, most, but not all.
So it looks like,
We do not, we have some, but we do not have it broken down actually. So when you look at this, this has been the issue. Over, some of these go between
Right.
one or two or three positions.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right,
And when we asked them, when we did this a few years ago, we said, we understand that you have this. But we would really like just the cost for the interfaith council. Because then we would know it costs you this much in administration for this and this much for
Mhm.
this. And we don't have even though we have the breakdown that it might be the food pantry person, manager might get this, the assistant this. We don't have it broken down as to the director of the interfaith council who might do both. This is their salary, and then we're gonna go this salary and that, and
Yeah.
it's not clearly broken down where others have to give us a sheet that says.
Mhm.
The executive director makes this one makes this,
right,
and it's not us going through this and then saying, oh, so do we add this and this and that to figure out what somebody's getting?
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
And
because
that,
I saw
it's-
some
it's-
salaries here, but it's not complete as what you're just referring to.
correct.
Yeah.
So I think that this is an ongoing issue.
Yeah.
And I would like to know that because I think Joanna, when you weren't here when I asked this question of Jericho, is that we're still very much up in the air as to what the cannabis grant would be or per se. And some of the, a couple of the things inside of these packets that I've read, parts of them are
Apply
parts
to
of
that.
cannabis.
yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, like the Fair Winds has in their peer coaching program, and that was funded through the cannabis grant last year.
Yeah.
So, not-
My sense, and Dorothy, you may have had some other conversations. I don't think it's gonna happen. I think
I
that
think
money's
if it-
gonna be tied up.
I think if it happens, it would come to us, from what I understand, it's gonna be last minute, almost like it was the first year. Where we found out,
Yeah.
we found out in, what, February?
Yeah, we only. had
February,
couple
we had
weeks
like
or
a
something
week
like
to
that.
put it out.
Was that my first year? the first year was the one that came out? Was that 2020?
It was it was a
Okay, so this
transition
is-
year.
We're in 2024, 2023. So
It was your
Yeah.
transition year.
So it would have been like the one I came in.
You and
November,
Rachel were
yeah.
like a back and forth, but, so I think what we're trying, and that, as I'm looking at these, we have a lot of money being asked of us. And some of them would be in there, so I actually did reach out to Brian today, Joanna, to see, I didn't hear back, but to see. What would we possibly be looking at? But there's a lot of work to be done on Jericho's part in order for us to even have the faintest idea if there's gonna be funding there.
So what happened is the law that passed split the way that municipalities can collect revenue from dispensaries into two fronts. There's an economic impact that can be assessed that's charged under the home community agreement that each dispensary has to sign. And then there is an additional town bylaw that is applied only to recreational sales. This law was written in lay language. It was not a legal document when it was signed into law. And it will only be resolved, like the actual specifics of the law are going to be determined by lawsuit as people challenge these bills. So there's an enormous amount of ambiguity as to whether or not the cannabis grant that we collect, which is assessed off of the recreational sales, is going to be considered an economic impact, or if that's separate. And that has to be determined by state legislation and probably by trial.
And didn't I understand that, in most of them, it was actually that they can say, we want to give a gift, not us telling them they have to give the gift, they tax money. So in making it very simple, I think what actually is supposed to be in the new changing of the law and the challenge in the law would be that the dispensary would say, I will give a gift of this towards it.
I think
Right, but before it was their tax.
because the grant money was tax money.
Right,
And the economic impact was rolled together and they just calculated based off gross sales in the past.
Correct, but
Now we have to separate those two parts apart so that we could by town bylaw still collect percentage of sales tax for local use. But we can't assign that. We have to calculate the cost to the municipality before we do that. It's really nebulous and really ambiguous. Like there's no even list of, like, some communities can ask to have their equivalent of the cannabis grant funding be part of the economic impact. Others are assessing it independently, the other ones. So it's just like, what's gonna happen is I'm gonna collect as much data as I can. I'm gonna bring it to town admin, and then we're gonna have to decide how much we want to ask for this economic impact, how well can we document that? And then it's up to the dispensaries to challenge that bill in court, as far as I understood it, for the impact cost. But nothing in the law separates out the cannabis grant money from the economic impact cost.
no, but from what I understood is that they can, is that they can say, we're gonna, the town can say, we want you to give this, and they can
Mhm.
say, we're not gonna do it. They have a choice to
Mhm.
make that or to not make it, according to what I understood from that seminar was that,
Yeah, I
that
mean,
it's not something anymore that we can say, okay, these tax dollars are going to here. It's actually, they have a right now in the processing of, funds.
to see a documentation of impact costs. But the definition of impact costs isn't in the law.
yeah,
So it's uncertain whether or not, say, funding a school program for drug abuse resistance education, for like a DARE programming, it's unclear if that's an economic impact or if that could be satisfied through the separate legal mechanism that collects the recreational sales taxes. There isn't an answer yet. They wrote it, they passed it, and then now they're gonna figure out what the law says. Basically, it's really complicated and I don't understand that part of it. I just know when I have the document.
okay, I've got a basic question. The grants that we have right now. Organizations have applied for programming that have nothing to do with the cannabis.
Correct.
Incorrect.
Right.
No, incorrect.
It
Some of these programs right now
It
are
overlaps.
ones that went through the cannabis and they put it into this grant process. So if you read the grants, like Fair Winds is putting in for their peer recovery coaches. And Dr. Lepre, who would have been in the cannabis one, are into this process, which
Oh, I
wasn't.
see. I see
Okay.
what you're saying.
Isn't-
Yeah,
So there
so
isn't a separate,
there used to be a separate cannabis
Right.
one, and right now what we're looking at is we don't know whether that'll happen this year.
so the organizations understand
I
that, so
think the
they
organization
folded
had
it
an
in.
idea
Yeah.
and they put some of it into this. And
Okay.
so what we're looking at is monies that we would have maybe been giving
From
you know,
a separate
from a
pot of
separate
money.
funding are
Right.
now coming into a funding that has already been really stretched to begin with.
Right,
Um,
because the way I'm looking at it, we have probably close to 200 or about $200,000 in requests more than money that we have.
happens every time.
Right.
So this is just interesting to see where we're headed this way. Joanne, I said before, I have to really keep this
Yeah.
short tonight because of a family situation.
Yeah.
But I would like to just quickly.
I do too. I need to go.
Yeah.
Yes. I have chaos as well.
But if we could just quickly, the Habitat for Humanity one,
Yeah.
and I've read over it.
Dorothy,
Um,
I just had one quick question. Sorry, I had my hand up.
Okay, okay, I would rather have gotten you at the end, but.
Oh, okay.
go on.
No, I was just going to ask a question related to the board responsibility here. It seems like, the board seems small at 5. And should there not be some responsibility from the board in terms of the oversight and understanding of the organization and where it's going and how it's operating?
Which board?
The board of
Mhm.
Nantucket Food Fuel. The Interfaith Council.
What do you mean the board?
The board of directors.
So the
So,
board, the board of directors has always been, it's the church representatives. That's what it is.
yeah,
Church has a representative to it.
which maybe at some point there should be discussion about their bylaws in terms of how it's organized, because oftentimes, the food pantries should have an organized board of directors that can help with some of these operational audits and other issues that seem to be a problem here.
Okay, one thing that I've always been, we've been told is that, sorry to say this. We can have our opinions, but we cannot tell an organization how to run itself. We have the right to say to them, we don't, like, maybe you should do this, but when we get into it, it's not our job to run their organizations. I don't mean to be mean, but that is where we stand. But if I can go on to this, very quickly, on the Habitat for Humanity, this is the first time we've ever had anything in front of us that actually really just describes helping one family with a unit
specific-
of a house improvement.
Yeah.
So I've struggled with this one because our objective is, I believe the objective of the funding from the contract review committee is to make an impact, and whatever funding we have, what greater impact it can make. Now, that impact doesn't mean that the impact can't be for 10 people. If that impact is tremendous and that impact takes those 10 people that then again affect another 10, and we make a difference, right? And in some cases, I've also advocated and said, if we can save one person's life, then we've done our job. A HVAC system, to me, does not fit into the genre of a social service entity. And I hate to say that this is a convenience, and maybe it's economically, it'll improve a piece of property and somebody's ability to do something. But, and this is just me, my opinion on this is that,
It does seem fundamentally different from all of the other.
Every-
It was extremely
Everything.
different than any application we've ever had in regards to any piece of property. And, you know, it would be different if you were telling me that it's. I don't know, it doesn't fit into, an HVAC system does not fit into a social service to me.
I don't have-
Benefit, and I just want to put that out there as, you know, has bothered me since the beginning that we got it. I'm happy that Habitat for Humanity thought to address us, but,
My thought with that, I kept saying, aren't there other places they should be asking for this? As opposed to our pot of money, which is for the community. If it was an HVAC system for
A school.
a school, or for, you know, even like
The
a
daycare, small friends or whatever.
well, friends or whatever, that makes sense, but this is a private home. That a family will live in, or two families, however many, but it's, there has to be other funding sources beside us to get that from. It says it doesn't meet the criteria. I don't believe.
it doesn't meet this does
No.
not meet our criteria. You know, it would if it was actually, helping to build a house,
Or if
we
it-
could look at that differently, but this, and that is even, would be in it.
Because
You
of our
felt it.
housing shortage or whatever, but we
Right.
were building more.
But that, and this is just my opinion, so I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah.
And I know we all have very limited time, so I'm just gonna, I've heard what you feel, and I'm just
Yeah.
gonna reach out to John and then Joanna.
Mhm.
Hey, John. Your
I'm-
thoughts on that?
I'm with you, Dorothy. It just seems to me that it does not fit what the town wants us to be considering and spending its money for. Its impact is too narrow, too focused, and literally it doesn't seem to me that it reaches a community need. And I also agree that this is something that Habitat could certainly go and find somebody or some other sources for this particular kind of funding. That's my view.
Joanna?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably more in the middle on this because I do think that, you know, these are the same people who are going to the food pantry, right? The people who will need this house ultimately, right? And who use a lot of these other services that we fund. At the same time, what John just said is also correct. They can probably get this money from somewhere else in a way that these other organizations can't. And so I would agree.
Yeah, I think that this is actually an existing house. This is not a
No,
new
it's
house.
not a
It's an
new construction.
existing house that somebody's in.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
may I pose a very quick question to the board? When people are like, oh, I heard you have a CRC funding, they end up asking me, and it would be better if I kind of knew, I don't want to steer anyone to not apply, but this does seem to be a different kind of proposal. If this was instead of a proposal to like, I don't know, put LED lights in all of Habitat for Humanity's housing or something systemic or like something broad-based, would that change your guys'? Doesn't seem like it. Okay,
No.
fair. All right, in the interest of time, that's good.
No,
okay, with that being said.
Everybody, I have to scoot, so my apologies.
Joanna, if you can stay 1 second so we can close down the meeting.
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you.
motion to adjourn.
I motion we adjourn.
We got a motion to adjourn. I need a
Second.
Second,
Okay,
Veronica, I.
Joanna,
I.
John
John?
Valash, aye.
Dorothy, aye. Thanks, everybody.
Okay,
Bye, everyone. Enjoy your weekends.
Yes.
we are off.